cosmic collision. The worst part about crash landing on an alien planet wasn't the crash itself. Jackson Reed had weathered worse. The time his cargo ship lost an engine in the series' asteroid field, the botched delivery to the mining colonies of Titan, even that disastrous blind date with the Martian ambassador's nephew. No, the truly problematic part was waking up suspended upside down by glowing purple vines, blood rushing to his head, while a towering alien woman circled him like he was the day's special at an interstellar buffet. "Is this how you greet all your visitors?" Jackson coughed, trying to blink away the blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. "If so, your tourism board needs serious reconsideration." The alien didn't respond, merely continuing her predatory circle. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her body encased in armor that seemed to capture and reflect the starlight itself. Iridescent patterns shifted across the surface with every movement, hypnotic and threatening in equal measure. Her skin was a deep indigo, marked with luminescent patterns that pulsed with her breathing. Most striking were her eyes, silver with vertical pupils that expanded and contracted as she studied him. "You are trespassing," she finally said, her voice carrying an otherworldly harmonics that made Jackson's ears ring, "on sacred hunting grounds during the Crimson season." "Would you believe I was just looking for a shortcut?" Jackson attempted a smile despite his predicament. "Navigation system malfunctioned, totally unintentional invasion of your hunting season, my sincerest apologies." The alien warrior unsheathed a weapon from her back, a staff that hummed with energy, its edge vibrating at a frequency that made Jackson's teeth ache. Uninvited, unwelcome. She tilted her head, silver eyes gleaming, and unusually talkative for prey. "It's a defense mechanism," Jackson admitted. "Talk until the threat gets confused or bored enough to leave. Works better with debt collectors than with armed alien Amazons, apparently." Something flashed across her face, curiosity perhaps, or indigestion. Jackson wasn't well versed in alien facial expressions. "I am Talith, Huntmaster of the Vexari Sovereign Territories," she declared, her voice carrying ceremonial weight, "and you have violated our most sacred laws." "Jackson Reed," he replied, "cargo pilot, occasional comedian, and currently human piñata. Look, there's been a misunderstanding. If you could just cut me down gently, I'll be on my way." Talith's lips twitched almost imperceptibly. "Your ship is destroyed. There is no way for you to be on." "Minor setback," Jackson waved dismissively, which looked ridiculous while hanging upside down. "I've got rescue protocols. Someone will come looking eventually." "Not before the crimson moon rises," Talith said, gesturing to the darkening sky where a massive celestial body was beginning to emerge, casting an ominous red glow across the landscape. "When it reaches zenith, the hunt begins. All trespassers become prey." Jackson swallowed hard. That sounds ceremonial and potentially fatal. "It is both," Talith confirmed, raising her weapon. "Wait," Jackson blurted out. "Before you turn me into human kebab, I have a proposition." Talith paused, her weapon humming menacingly inches from his throat. "Speak quickly, human." Jackson's mind raced. He needed time, he needed leverage, he needed something so outrageous it would give her pause. "If I survive this," he said, the words tumbling out before his better judgment could stop them, "I should marry you, don't you think?" It was pure desperation, a Hail Mary joke thrown into the cosmic void, but what happened next defied all his expectations. Talith laughed. It wasn't a friendly sound, more like crystalline shards falling on metal, sharp and startling. Her silver eyes widened with genuine amusement, as if he'd just told the most ridiculous joke in the galaxy. "You," she said between cutting laughs, "would marry a Vexari Huntmaster." "Hey, I've dated worse," Jackson shrugged awkwardly in his suspended state. "My last girlfriend stole my ship and left me stranded on Europa for 3 months." Talith's laughter echoed off the jagged crystalline formations surrounding them, a sound that might have been beautiful if it weren't so thick with mockery. Her amusement at his absurd proposal was almost palpable. Until suddenly, it wasn't. The ground beneath them trembled. At first, Jackson thought it might be an earthquake, not uncommon after crash landings when fuel cells ruptured underground, but this was different, more focused, more intentional. The crimson soil beneath Talith's feet began to crack, golden light bleeding through the fissures like veins of molten metal. The patterns spread outward, forming intricate symbols that pulsed with ancient power. Talith's laughter died instantly, her expression transformed from amusement to shock, then quickly to something approaching horror. "No," she whispered, backing away from the spreading light. "It cannot be." The vines holding Jackson suddenly released, dropping him unceremoniously to the ground. He landed with a painful thud, groaning as he rolled to his feet. "What's happening?" he asked, massaging his wrists where the vines had gripped him. Talith didn't answer immediately. She knelt beside the glowing patterns, her fingers hovering just above the surface, not quite touching. Her face, previously unreadable and deadly, had shifted into something Jackson hadn't seen yet, reverence mixed with fear. "You have spoken the binding words," she finally said, her voice barely audible over the humming energy emanating from the ground. "The what now?" Jackson stepped closer, entranced by the golden symbols that continued to spread, forming a complex network around them both. "The sacred vow," Talith stood, turning to face him. All humor, all contempt was gone from her expression. "You have awakened the Nexus core." Jackson blinked, trying to process her words. "Hang on, are you telling me that my stupid joke about marrying you triggered some kind of alien magic?" "Not magic," Talith corrected sharply. "Ancient technology. The architects who first walked Nyxara embedded binding contracts within the planet itself. Words of commitment spoken in the presence of a nexus point cannot be retracted." "So, what exactly are you saying?" Jackson asked, though a sinking feeling in his stomach told him he already knew. Talith's silver eyes fixed on him, her expression grim. "By the laws of Vexari, by the will of the architects, and by the power of the Nexus, we are now bond promised." "Bond promised," Jackson repeated flatly, "as in?" "In your human terms," Talith said, the words clearly distasteful to her, betrothed. Jackson stared at her for a long moment, then he started to laugh, not because it was funny, but because the alternative was screaming. "Let me get this straight. I crash on your planet, you threaten to kill me, I make a sarcastic marriage proposal, and now we're what? Alien engaged." Before Talith could respond, the ground shook again, more violently this time. The glowing patterns pulsed once, blindingly bright, before sinking back into the earth. A mark remained, however, a small, intricate symbol now etched into the soil between them. "We must leave this place," Talith said urgently, gathering her equipment. "The activation of a nexus point sends a signal. Others will come." "Others like who?" "Wedding planners," Jackson quipped, still struggling to process what had just happened. "The Void Seekers," she replied grimly. "They guard the ancient laws. Unauthorized bindings are prohibited." "And what happens to those who make unauthorized bindings?" Talith's expression darkened. "They are erased completely." Jackson felt his heart sink. "Of course they are," he sighed, running a hand through his dust-covered hair. "So we're running from space assassins because I made a bad joke. Perfect." "The binding is more than symbolic," Talith explained as she shouldered her pack. "It creates a quantum entanglement between our life forces. If we separate beyond the prescribed distance, the severance will kill us both." "How prescribed is prescribed?" Jackson asked, already dreading the answer. 50 meters, Talith replied, until the bond is formalized or broken. "And how do we break it?" "The Temple of Dissolution. We must reach it before the Crimson Moon completes its cycle." "And if we don't?" Talith's silver eyes met his, her expression unreadable once more. "Then we remain bound for life." Above them, the Crimson Moon continued its slow ascent, bathing the landscape in blood-red light. In the distance, a sound like tearing fabric split the air, a ship entering the atmosphere. "They are coming," Talith said, extending her hand to him with obvious reluctance. "We must move as one now. The bond requires physical contact to stabilize during its initial formation." Jackson looked at her outstretched hand, then at the alien sky where shadows were beginning to take shape. With a resigned sigh, he took her hand. Her skin was cool to the touch, the luminescent patterns pulsing more brightly at the contact. "For what it's worth," he said as they began to move across the alien landscape, hand in hand, "this is definitely not how I imagined getting engaged." Talith's expression remained stern, but for just a moment, Jackson thought he saw the ghost of a smile touch her lips. "Human," she said, her voice softer than before, "nothing about this union will be as you imagined." Above them, the Crimson Moon watched their flight, silent and implacable, as the hunt for both of them now began in earnest. Ancient bonds awakened. The Crimson Moon cast long shadows across the jagged terrain as Jackson and Talith fled through the wilderness of Nyxara. The planet's landscape was both breathtaking and menacing, towering crystal formations jutted from the earth like frozen lightning bolts, reflecting the blood-red moonlight in hypnotic patterns. Bioluminescent vegetation pulsed in rhythm with their footsteps, as if the entire planet was alive and watching. "So," Jackson panted as they scaled a steep incline, their hands still reluctantly joined, On a scale of 1 to completely screwed, where exactly are we? Talith's silver eyes flashed in the dim light. We are beyond your scale. That's not reassuring. It wasn't meant to be. They crested the ridge and Jackson momentarily forgot his predicament. Spread before them was a vast valley filled with massive floating stones, each one suspended impossibly above the ground, rotating slowly like planets around an invisible sun. Rivers of luminescent liquid flowed upward, defying gravity, connecting the stones in complex patterns. "What is this place?" Jackson whispered, awestruck. "The Gravity Gardens," Talith replied, her voice softening slightly. "Created during the Second Age when the architects still walked among us. Few outsiders have seen it." "It's beautiful," Jackson admitted. "And it will keep us hidden temporarily." Talith gestured toward the floating stones. "The mineral composition interferes with tracking technology. The Void Seekers will be forced to hunt us on foot." As if summoned by her words, a distant sound split the air, the unmistakable hum of engines. A sleek black vessel pierced the clouds above, its surface seeming to absorb rather than reflect light, creating a vessel-shaped void in the starry sky. "Down," Talith commanded, pulling Jackson into the shadow of a crystal formation. They watched as the ship hovered above the valley, scanning the landscape below with pulses of violet energy. "Those are the Void Seekers," Jackson whispered. Talith nodded grimly. "They serve the Council of Elders who maintain the ancient laws. Unauthorized bindings disrupt the cosmic order." "All this because of a joke," Jackson muttered. "Remind me to work on my timing." "Your words had power here," Talith replied. "All words do on Nyxara. The architects believed language was the foundation of reality." She glanced at him, silver eyes reflecting the crimson moonlight. "Your species speaks carelessly." "And yours takes everything too literally," Jackson countered. "Where I come from, proposing marriage usually involves dinner first, maybe some flowers, not immediate cosmic entanglement." For the first time, something resembling amusement flickered across Talith's face. "Vexari courtship is also more. Elaborate. It typically involves ritual combat and the exchange of battle scars." "Romantic," Jackson said dryly. "So where are we headed exactly?" Talith pointed toward a distant mountain range, barely visible on the horizon. "The Temple of Dissolution lies beyond the crystal wastes. If we reach it before the crimson moon completes its cycle, the bond can be severed." "And if we don't?" "Then the binding becomes permanent. Our life forces remain entangled until death." "Great cosmic shotgun wedding, just how I plan to spend my weekend." The Void Seeker vessel moved on, disappearing behind the distant mountains. Talith stood, tugging Jackson to his feet. "We must move quickly through the Gravity Gardens. The path is treacherous." "Treacherous how?" Jackson asked, immediately regretting the question. His answer came moments later as they descended into the valley. The floating stones, seemingly stable from a distance, shifted unpredictably up close. The ground beneath their feet occasionally reversed gravity without warning, nearly sending Jackson hurtling upward toward the stars before Talith yanked him back down. "The gardens respond to emotional states," Talith explained after saving him for the third time. "Stay calm, focus on balance." "Easy for you to say," Jackson grumbled. "You're not the one who just found out he's mystically engaged to an alien who was going to kill him an hour ago." "I wasn't going to kill you," Talith said matter-of-factly. "You literally had a vibro spear at my throat. If I had wanted you dead, you would be." "I was curious." "About what?" "Why a human would venture so far into forbidden space, why you would crash on our most sacred hunting ground during the Crimson season. It seemed improbable." Jackson frowned. "Are you suggesting this wasn't an accident?" Before Talith could answer, the ground shifted beneath them, not the gentle gravity reversal from before, but a violent tremor that sent cracks racing through the crystalline surface. Golden light, the same energy that had appeared when the binding activated, began to seep through the fissures. "What's happening?" Jackson asked, struggling to maintain his balance. Talith's expression darkened. "The bond, it's growing stronger, resonating with the planet's energy fields." She grabbed his wrist, pulling him forward. "We need to keep moving. The temple is our only chance." They ran across the unstable terrain, leaping from one floating stone to another as the ground continued to fracture behind them. The golden light grew more intense, illuminating the night as brightly as day. In the distance, the Void Seeker vessel changed course, heading directly toward the disturbance. "They've found us," Talith hissed. They reached a river of the glowing liquid. Up close, Jackson could see it wasn't liquid at all. but millions of tiny luminescent particles flowing in perfect unison. Talith didn't hesitate, pulling him directly into the stream. Jackson expected to feel wet, but instead the particles parted around them, enveloping them in a cocoon of gentle light. The sensation was bizarre, like being simultaneously weightless and hyper-aware of every cell in his body. The particles swirled faster, carrying them upward against the flow of the river. "What is this?" Jackson gasped, watching as his skin began to glow with the same patterns that marked Talith's indigo flesh. "The heart stream," Talith replied, her voice echoing strangely. "It responds to the bond, it's protecting us." The stream deposited them on a floating island far above the valley floor. From this vantage point, they could see the Void Seeker vessel deploying smaller craft, black dart-like ships that scattered in different directions, scanning the landscape. "They're thorough," Jackson observed. "They're relentless," Talith corrected. She released his hand for the first time since they began their flight, flexing her fingers as if the contact had become uncomfortable. The Void Seekers believe unauthorized bindings create fractures in reality itself. "And do they?" Talith hesitated. "There are legends, ancient stories of bonds that changed the course of stars." She looked at him, her silver eyes reflecting the glowing patterns that now marked his skin. "The marks are spreading faster than I expected. The bond is unusually strong." Jackson glanced down at his arms, where intricate patterns pulsed beneath his skin, mirroring the ones on Talith's body. "Is that normal?" "No," Talith admitted. "Bonds typically form gradually over lunar cycles. This is accelerated." A sudden wave of dizziness hit Jackson, making him stumble. Talith caught him, steadying him with surprising gentleness. "The initial bonding creates a shared consciousness," she explained. "You may experience echoes of my thoughts, fragments of memory." As if triggered by her words, images flashed through Jackson's mind, a younger Talith undergoing brutal training rituals, her first hunt, the death of someone important to her, a ceremony where she received her title of Hunt Master, and most recently, the order to patrol the sacred hunting grounds during the Crimson Season. "You were ordered here," Jackson said, the realization dawning. "Not by chance. Someone specifically assigned you to this region during the Crimson Season." Talith's eyes widened. "You saw that?" "I saw fragments." Jackson pressed a hand to his temple, trying to sort through the foreign memories. "Someone named Drentar sent you here, against tradition. Why would they?" A blast of energy struck the floating island, sending chunks of crystal raining down into the valley below. 3 Void Seeker dart ships circled above them, weapons primed for another attack. Later, Talith said, grabbing Jackson's hand again and pulling him toward the far edge of the island. "We jump." Jackson stared at the dizzying drop below. "Are you insane?" "Trust the bond," Talith replied, and before he could protest further, she leaped from the edge, dragging him into the abyss. They fell, Jackson's scream caught in his throat, but instead of plummeting to their deaths, the golden patterns on their skin flared brilliantly, and their descent slowed. They drifted like leaves on a gentle breeze, landing softly at the edge of the gravity gardens. "How did you know that would work?" Jackson demanded, his heart still hammering. "I didn't," Talith admitted, "but the bond grows stronger by the minute. It wants us to survive." The bond is sentient." "Not exactly, but the architects designed the binding rituals to protect those who entered them. A bond pair was sacred in their culture, meant to combine strengths and nullify weaknesses." Another blast struck nearby, showering them with crystal shards. The Void Seekers hadn't given up. "Run," Talith commanded, pulling him toward a dense forest of twisted, luminescent trees that marked the edge of the valley. "The crystal wastes lie beyond. We can lose them there." As they ran, Jackson felt something shift in the bond between them, a warmth that hadn't been there before. He glanced at Talith, wondering if she felt it too. Her expression remained stoic, but her hand gripped his more firmly than necessary. "For what it's worth," Jackson said as they plunged into the forest, "as accidental engagements go, this one's been pretty memorable so far." Talith didn't respond, but Jackson swore he saw the corner of her mouth twitch upward for just a moment. Behind them, the Void Seekers' weapons carved burning trails through the night, illuminating the path they had taken. Ahead, the distant mountains loomed, the Temple of Dissolution hidden somewhere among their peaks, their only hope of ending the bond that was rapidly becoming something neither of them had expected. The crimson moon continued its silent journey across the sky, marking the passage of time. With each hour, the temple grew more distant, the bond grew stronger, and the choice before them grew more complicated than either would admit.